at it again today with another Top 5 NFL Draft 2024 edition. This time it's going to be my top 5, or I guess maybe bottom 5 draft picks of the first round. So my top 5 least favorite draft picks of the first round. And I gotta be honest with you, this was a little bit tougher than I originally thought it was going to be. I felt like, at least live during the draft, there were quite a few picks that I didn't necessarily agree with or understand. But then kind of looking at it in hindsight, they seemed okay to me. So this is actually a little bit more difficult. And quite frankly, a lot, if not all, of these players are really, really good players. Of course they are. They're first-round picks in the NFL draft. But more what I mean is I don't think that it's necessarily the player that is at fault here. It's not necessarily, oh, this guy drafted this player who absolutely stinks in the first round. I don't think that happened at all, quite frankly, with any of these. I just more think that the fit or the value is not quite there from what I would have expected for either this player or at this particular spot. And there's no better example of that for me than J.C. Latham. Fantastic player. Depending on where he fell and to what team, I would have been absolutely thrilled for the team that would have ended up drafting him. And I just think that the Titans, once Joe Alt went off the board at 5, early on to the Chargers, I think that they just quite frankly panicked. And I think that probably my guess is that they tried to trade back, and nobody would bite. Nobody wanted to jump up. And so they had to kind of reach a little bit on a guy. And look, again, J.C. Latham, fantastic player at Alabama. I think he's going to be a pretty good player in the NFL. I just think that the value of him at 7 is just a little bit weak, especially considering the amount of tackles in this draft. I think that at the very least you could have drafted Rome Odunze at 7, which I believe is where I had him projected to go. He was still on the board at this point. Or again, you could have traded back, but I guess that's not always just an easy thing to do. If nobody wants to trade up, then it is what it is. But I just feel like he could have gone a little bit different direction here, and the value is not quite there for me. And so again, I have this at my number 5. Chop Robinson makes this list at number 4, although I'm sure he probably doesn't really care or want to make the list anyway, but he makes it regardless. It's just another one of those picks where I know that the Dolphins lost quite a bit on defense, but I think Chop Robinson was probably not the best draft pick here. Again, value for your pick. I had him going at 26, I believe, to the Bucks, and then a lot of people actually projected for him to go a little bit later than that. In the high 20s to low 30s, possibly even falling into the second round. And so I think it's a bit of a reach here. And plus, I just don't love the fit. I think that out of every spot you have on defense, I think what Jalen Phillips gives you as a pass rush is at least more adequate than the other spots, like defensive back, like safety, like linebacker, like defensive tackle. Like these are all spots that they could have gone. Obviously, you probably wouldn't have gone defensive tackle with Byron Murphy off the board, but at the same time, you still had all of the corners that were in the draft available at this number 21 spot. Kenyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Terrion Arnold, Nate Wiggins, they were all available on the board at this point. And instead you went with Chop Robinson, who again, I like as a prospect, but he's a bit raw. He's a very good athlete. He had some good pressure stats at Penn State. But again, he's raw. He's not super technically sound. He's more of a developmental pick. And I think that if you're going to go defense for the Miami Dolphins, considering every single person that you lost in the offseason, you should have gone with somebody who's going to be a little more consistent and can slide in and start for you and be consistent from day one. I think any of those defensive backs would have been a much better pick. So Chop Robinson, again, nothing to do necessarily with the actual player himself. I think Chop Robinson's probably going to be okay in the NFL, but I just didn't love the fit there, and I definitely didn't love the value for what the Dolphins needed versus what they got at 21. The quarterback carousel continues for the Denver Broncos as they drafted Bo Nix at number 12 in the draft. This was kind of the ultimate culmination of the sheer panic that ensued within the first 12 picks of the draft. And I'm sure you guys already know what's going to be coming later in terms of quarterbacks in the first round. But This to me was absolutely wild. Now, if you guys watched the predictions that Dan and I did for the first round, I actually had Bo Nix going in the first round, which a lot of people did not have at that point. So I think I had just the right amount of crazy, and it was the Dallas Cowboys taking him at number 24. And the reason why I had that was because I said that there's always one pick that happens that makes absolutely no sense, but that may make just enough sense in order for it to work. And somehow, Bo Nix, not only was he not available for the Cowboys at 24, he wasn't even available for the Raiders if they wanted to reach like crazy for Bo Nix at 13. He was gone because the Denver Broncos saw all these quarterbacks going off the board, and they absolutely panicked, thinking that if they even remotely traded back at all, that Bo Nix was going to be gone and he was going to be drafted by the Raiders or by some other team later on in the draft. And just, this is not good value. As far as I'm concerned, as far as just about everybody else is concerned, this is not good value. But again, has nothing to do with Bo Nix. It is not Bo Nix's fault that a team reached like crazy on him and is going to make him a top 12 pick in the draft. It is not Bo Nix's fault. He has been a great player in college. He had a really good year at Oregon last year. He's really, really good at getting the ball out quickly, going through his reads very quickly. And so again, he's a good quarterback. I think that if put in the right spot, he could actually succeed. The problem is that the Denver Broncos are completely rebuilding. They just traded away Jerry Jeudy, and now Bo Nix is going to be thrown in there with Cortland Sutton, who is a good wide receiver, admittedly, and Tim Patrick, who has been injured repeatedly over the last couple of years, and they're going to rely on him to be their number 2. I just don't get it. I don't get why you felt the need to draft him now. I think it would have been a much better value to take a guy like Spencer Rattler who can sit behind Jared Stidham for a year as you get your talent back in order, you get some more good draft picks, you make some more trades, and you continue to build around. Now, Bo Nix is going to probably be thrown into the fire right away, day one starter, with not a lot of talent around him. And I just think that it's a recipe for disaster for Bo Nix. And I think it's a recipe for disaster for the Broncos. We obviously know how the Russell Wilson, I'm in basketball mode, folks. Russell Wilson tenure ended in Denver. And I don't necessarily think that Bo Nix is going to end in the same way, but I don't think he's going to have that much more success than Russ, just based on the weapons he has around him. Now, could he rise above all of that and be an absolute game changer? Absolutely, he could, but he didn't showcase the ability to do that in college, and so I can't count on that to be the case in the pros, especially in the NFL. Your first year in the NFL is probably going to be your hardest, and if it's not the first year, it's the second year, because maybe the first year you could take people by surprise, but the second year, everybody knows who you are, and they're going to be scouting you, and they're going to know how to stop you. So I just think that this is bad value for the Broncos. I think it's a bad fit for Bo Nix. Obviously, in terms of playing time, it fits, but I just wouldn't love to be in Denver right now if I'm Bo Nix. I think that they needed to get a lot more weapons and players to actually help them out other than a quarterback in the first round. I think that you easily can see the Broncos being a top 5 pick in the draft next year. Sure, the quarterback class isn't as good next year as it is this year, or was this year, I should say. But at the very least, you might end up with a Shadur Sanders or a Carson Beck or somebody like that in the top 5 that you can end up with. Because I'm going to be honest, I don't see the Denver Broncos winning more than 5 games this year. I don't see how they can in that division with all the improvement across the board with the Raiders and the Chargers and the Chiefs. I don't see how they even have a chance to win more than 5 games with the amount of talent that they have. And they used their first round pick on a guy who most people didn't have going until the second round. Maybe a psycho like me had a team that shouldn't take him going in a late first round, but he went at 12, and so the Broncos just have to live with it. Another head scratcher for me here, the 49ers taking Ricky Pearsall in the first round. Now look, I like Ricky Pearsall as a player, but I gotta be honest. I have a Florida Gator fan at work. She's from Florida. She's a diehard Gators fan. And I even made the joke to her. I said, you know, I would make fun of the Florida people that are going to go in the first round, but they're not going to have any. Because nowhere in my wildest dreams did I expect Ricky Pearsall to be going in the first round. I didn't expect him to go past the second round, but I definitely didn't expect him to make the first round. I had at least 8 wide receivers, minimum, ahead of him in this draft, and he somehow goes in the first round ahead of guys like Adonai Mitchell, ahead of guys like Ladd McConkey, ahead of guys like Jalen Polk, all guys that I would have had ahead of Pearsall. I expected him to be more of a mid to late second round pick, if not early third round pick, although I would have been a little bit shocked had he fallen to the third round. I would have expected him to go mid second to late second. So this to me is just a big reach, especially with all the other guys on the board. I would have been floored had they taken Ladd McConkey instead. I thought that it would have been a great fit for them, a great weapon for Brock Purdy, especially in the offensive scheme that they run out there in San Francisco with Kyle Shanahan. But Ricky Pearsall is the guy. And what this means to me is, first of all, you took a flyer on a guy that maybe not a lot of other people had going at the spot, so you might have reached. And second of all, this essentially means that with either Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, or both, you're waving the white flag. You are saying, I don't think we're going to keep them. I don't think we're going to be able to re-sign either one or both of them. And so we got to just get another body to come in here to replace them, which, again, I understand. But there were other better players, in my opinion, on the board at this point. And I definitely think you could have also, considering the amount of wide receivers that were going at this point, you probably could have traded back 2 or 3 spots and still gotten Ricky Pearsall. I truly do. So I just think the value here it's really bad for me. I think that this is a big reach. And again, I said this a bunch of times in this video already. I don't think it has anything to do with Ricky Pearsall as a player. I actually think that he could be really good. I think he could be a 1,000-yard receiver someday. But to be a guy, to be a first-round pick, you've got to have uber athletic skills and just amazing talent that I just think other guys had more of than Ricky Pearsall at this point. And so for me, this is my number 2 least favorite pick for a reason. I just don't like the fit. I don't really like the value that the 49ers got for this pick. I think they should have gone Adonai Mitchell if they were going to go for wide receiver in the first round. No surprise here, right, guys? I mean, this was the definitive, craziest, wild, any other adjective you want to use, pick that happened in the first round. Nowhere in my wildest dreams did I think Michael Penix Jr. was going to go in the top 10. I didn't have him in the first round. I don't think most people had him going in the first round. And again, I know everybody has said this, and I've said it a bunch of times already. It has nothing to do with Michael Penix. I actually, personally, prefer Michael Penix over Bo Nix. And I feel like a lot of other people feel that way as well. So I think that the reason I had Bo Nix going at 24 to the Cowboys in my predictions is because I was trying to think like Jerry Jones would think. And I think that Michael Penix is similar in a lot of ways to what Dak Prescott gives you. And if you're drafting a quarterback to replace Dak Prescott because Dak Prescott's not good enough, then why would you draft a guy that's exactly like Dak Prescott to replace Dak Prescott? I just said Dak Prescott way too many times. But you get my point. If he's exactly like what you have and you don't like what you have, you shouldn't draft him. So to me, I thought that Bo Nix was a good change of pace. I think he's a guy that's a really definitive decision maker. Not to say that Michael Penix isn't, but he just has a different play style than Bo Nix. And so I was trying to think like Jerry Jones, not necessarily think like what I would have done, because if I was taking a quarterback at that point, I would have taken Michael Penix. But again, trying to think like Jerry Jones. I prefer Michael Penix Jr. over Bo Nix. I think that if you would have said, hey, one of the two of Bo Nix and Michael Penix has to be a first rounder, who would you take? I would have picked Michael Penix. I like him better. I understand the injury history is there. 2 torn ACLs, 2 shoulder surgeries. I understand that. But I still love the body of work. He obviously won. I believe he won the Heisman a couple of years ago, unless I'm out of my mind. But regardless, I just absolutely love the way he was a leader on that team. He obviously had a lot of weapons to help him, which, again, clearly helps. But at the same time, if you can't utilize those weapons, then you're no good anyway. So the fact that he was able to kind of incorporate all those weapons and make it all work, I think showcases his leadership ability. But 8? First of all, crazy lack of value regardless of who took him, right? Michael Penix at 8 was just not good value. When people are evaluating him as max a late first round pick, max, most of the time it's early second to mid second to late second and possibly even beyond. Now, I didn't agree with the beyond. But regardless, 8, that is just not good value at all. And add on top of that, The team that he's going to, I think out of every team in the NFL, other than the Chiefs or the Eagles or somebody like that has just an otherworldly great quarterback that's reasonably young, that's on a super long-term contract, or like the Bengals, like it wouldn't. This team may have made the least sense to draft Michael Penix Jr. on paper. You obviously signed Kirk Cousins. 4 years, $180 million, $100 million guaranteed. Only after 2 years is that guaranteed money gone. I'm pretty sure that after the second season, you still have somewhere in the realm of a $52 million cap hit or something like that. And then finally, after year 3, it drops to like 12 or 13 or 14, whatever it is, $1 million. If you guys want the exact numbers, you can fact check that yourself. But it's something in that range. So you are basically saying that one of two of these cases is going to be true. One, you wasted a top 10 draft pick on a guy who's never going to play for you because you signed a guy in free agency that carried your team to either multiple playoff berths or maybe even a Super Bowl and maybe even a Super Bowl victory for 4 years, and that contract was super worth it because he was great for you and he turned your franchise around, and therefore you wasted a top 10 pick on a guy you never used. Or you have just signed what may be, other than the Russell Wilson contract, because that's going to be pretty hard to beat, the worst quarterback contract in the history of the NFL. Because you had to draft a guy at number 8 to be his replacement because he kept getting hurt or he wasn't performing, and then you had to replace him, and now that $180 million is just eating away at your cap, and you're not going to be able to surround your now top 10 pick quarterback with any more talent than what you already have. And guess what? The clock is ticking. Drake London was drafted 3 or 4 years ago, so that means that he's only got 1 or 2 years left on his rookie deal. Bijan Robinson was obviously a rookie last year. He's got at least 3 more years. Great. That's awesome. Kyle Pitts was drafted 2 or 3 years ago, which means he's only got 1 or 2 years or maybe 3 max on his contract left, which means you're going to have to pay these guys. You're going to have to pay guys like A.J. Terrell. You're going to have to continue to draft defenders, and that's another part of this, by the way, that I'll get into. But sticking with this for now, I just think that the Falcons tried to get a little too cute, and they fell in love with Michael Penix, which is great. That's fine. But I think, realistically, if the Falcons didn't take Michael Penix at 8, he might have still been there at their next pick in the second round, where they took Rukarororo, right? There's a lot of R's in a row. I didn't like that at all. But regardless, I just think that the value's bad. I think the fit's bad. And again, nothing to do with Michael Penix. I love Michael Penix. I love the story. I truly, truly hope that he breaks through all of this craziness. And I hope that people are not taking it out on Michael Penix himself, because he's a great player and he deserves everything that he's gotten. Again, I don't think he had the talent to be a top 10 pick this year, but I still think he's going to be a good player. Problem mainly is the fit. It makes no sense for him to have been drafted by the Atlanta Falcons. Plus, Dallas Turner was on the board. You have not had a guy who's had double-digit sacks since Vic Beasley in 2016. No Grady Jarrett, no anyone else that has run through that organization over the last almost 10 years has put up a double-digit sack season. Nobody. You need pass rush so bad that it is basically the thing that's probably holding you back the most out of anything, because your defense is actually not bad. You have good pieces in the secondary with Jesse Bates and A.J. Terrell. You've got some decent young linebackers that are good in coverage that can help with that. But you got no pass rush, so every quarterback you play is going to be comfortable, sitting in the pocket, able to do whatever they want, because they're not afraid of getting hit. They're not afraid of getting sacked. Yeah, sure, it happens every once in a while, but it always happens every once in a while. But you're not sitting there as a quarterback or as an offensive lineman sitting there thinking, oh man, we're going to play the Falcons this week. How am I going to deal with X, Y, and Z? They're so good. No, you don't have to deal with that. But Dallas Turner was right there. He was right there. And after that, he fell another almost 10 picks. So you probably could have traded back with one of these other teams like the Jets, like the Raiders, like the Broncos, like the Vikings that really wanted a quarterback. Maybe somebody else valued Michael Penix that high. You probably could have gotten another first, or at the very least, a second, third round pick or whatever the case may be, and you may have still been able to get Michael Penix later. Or maybe you could have gotten Bo Nix later. Or maybe you could have gotten J.J. McCarthy later. Or you could have gotten anybody later. But guess what? It doesn't matter. You didn't need a quarterback. So I think this was just an absolute catastrophe from the Atlanta Falcons. Honestly, might be one of the most head-scratching moves that I've ever seen happen in the first round in any draft. And this is coming from the guy that's been yelling about the Patriots drafting Cole Strange in the first round for the last 2 years. Wild that they took Michael Penix. I could not believe it when I heard Adam Schefter saying that they were talking about it. I was like, yeah, it's probably just a bunch of baloney. And then I heard Michael Penix Jr.'s name get called, and my jaw just hit the floor. I could not believe it. And again, nothing to do with Michael Penix. He's a great player. But Falcons, what are you doing? I mean, what are you doing? You gotta be kidding me. And I hear people defend this pick as if it's smart. It's not smart. It's crazy. The only way it's smart is if the contract that you signed with Kirk Cousins is a sham, which means that that's not smart. So something is not smart that's happened here. Whether it's this pick or whether it's the contract. You can't have it both ways. Anyway. That's going to do it for my list. Did you guys agree with the list? Is there somebody that I missed? I didn't mean to rhyme there, but I did. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Keep an eye out for more of these top 5 lists. They're going to be coming out pretty much every day over the next handful of days. So keep an eye out for those. Thank you all so very much for watching, and I will see you next time.